All right, so one of the things that you're asked to do in the assignment is to render a dynamic list of courses, either as a grid or as a list, right? And that you can toggle between the two, right? And last time we met, we looked at an actual implementation where we can use routing, right, to navigate between one or the other. Yes. So for instance, let's review where we left off. Here we have the project that we worked on last time we met, and I believe we can access it through localhost 3000, right? And we created a really simple example on how we could navigate between various components, where we had list, grid, and the editor. Correct? Right? So let's see how we can take a look at using this JSON file to render something dynamically. All right, so for one of the problems of dealing with dynamically navigating between pages is that one of the challenges is that we would like to be able to pass data down to those pages that we are navigating to. Right. So for instance, in the list and the grid, we would like to pass somehow what are the courses that you want me to render here. Okay. Presumably, it would be my courses. If somebody else is a different faculty, they log in, perhaps it would be their courses, right? So this page would be dynamically rendered depending on who logs in. You know, I'm editing my courses and you edit your courses. Yes. If this is a student and they log in, maybe they see the courses that they are registered in. Yes, that where they're a student and whatnot. Same thing with the editor. Also, they should be dynamic, right? And the editor would be rendering or editing a course that you select, either in the grid or list. As you select a particular course, you want to navigate to the editor for that particular course. Yes? All right. All right. So what do we get the data? Well, we were suggesting that for now, since we don't yet have a server, well, we do, but we're not using it quite yet. That you should use this hard-coded list of data that we give you, which is hosted in my GitHub repository. And basically the list is it's a JSON object. It's a JSON array that contains two objects. Each object represents a course, right? So this one, the first object, here's the array. The first object represents CS5610, and down below there's another course that represents CS5200. Yes? Okay. And this might be a response from some RESTful service that you go and fetch and say, well, give me my courses. And it might respond with something like this. Right? Notice that each course also has modules under there, right? So each module has a whole bunch of lessons, and each lesson has a whole bunch of topics. Yes? So how do we render this? Well, let's look at the implementation on how we got to this, right? And move a little further on how is it that we would render this dynamically, this dynamic content dynamically. Okay, let's see. So one of the first steps will be that we'll need a file locally on this client that represents this data, and that's exactly what I did. I went to my GitHub repository. I copied this file, and I copied it onto a file called courses.json. Everybody okay? All right, it's just a plain old JSON file. It has to be well formatted in that it has to have all these double quotes everywhere, right? All the attributes need to have double quotes. The values have to have double quotes. These could be numbers, right? That's a valid format, but we're not quite sure what are we going to use to represent these unique identifiers. So I might as well make them strings. Okay, especially later on when we use MongoDB. MongoDB uses strings, right? So let's leave them as strings. All right, so we have a JSON file. Again, this would be instead something that you would get from the network by hitting some RESTful API or some website. Yes. Right now we don't have that yet. We will next week, or maybe by the end of this week. We're going very fast. But for now, it'll be just hard-coded JSON file. All right. Okay, so what we'd like to be able to do is load this file and then pass it around to whoever needs to render it. Okay. So for instance, one place that we can load it is from our from our whiteboard, right, our top level component, we could load this file, and then notice that we can pass it down to either the course grid, the course list. I like to pass it down for them to be able to render it. Yes? I notice that course grid and course list, we'll see they both should be able to render the same data, but differently. One renders it as a list, whereas the other one renders it as a grid. All right? Okay, so let's do that. Let's load the JSON file. You can say import the local file. I'll call it courses from the local file system. So it's a ./courses. There it is. So now this file has been loaded dynamically into the courses file, and then I could pass it around. But how do I pass it to a component? If this were a component all by itself, like this, right, I could pass it by saying courses and then referencing that variable. Yes, I could do that. I could do that, but the problem is that here I don't have an actual component. I have reference to a component, but I can't pass an attribute. There's no syntax here for passing the attribute. Another option would be that in course grid, I could do the same thing. I could load the courses, load it here, and then in here iterate over the courses. Yes.
You can actually pass it through rounds if you just use a
render.
Well, just use component equals and then
Yeah, we're going to use render in a minute. Yeah, yeah. So I could load it. I could load it here in the courses, and now I have access to the courses variable here in the course grid, right? And maybe and then use map and iterate over that array, right? The problem with this approach is that now it becomes very hard to test this this component, right? Because it has data that is already embedded inside of the component. There's no way for me from the outside to pass it some data, right, and configure it any which way I want, right, to test whether it's rendering correctly. Right? So ideally, I would not do that approach, right? Courses. So ideally, I would be able to pass it here as an attribute, as a property, as courses, as an argument, and then I can iterate over that. Yes? So that would be the ideal. So I'm going to stick to loading it here and passing it down, right, to whoever needs it. Right. So let's take a look at this. One way there's a couple of syntax, right? But one particular syntax that we're going to be using is the render syntax. The route has an alternative syntax called render. So we'll do render. Now render, the syntax uses the same thing. It uses an expression, right, an ES6 expression, but it allows you to define a function that allows you to dynamically calculate whatever it is that you want to return, right? Now you can put logic in here, and based on that logic, you can decide what is it you want to return, right? So that makes it very, very dynamic, right? Based on what state of this component, I could decide to return one thing or return another thing, right? This will be very handy later on when we do widgets, right? Because there's a whole bunch of types of widgets, yes? And we want to create somewhat of a generic mechanism that we can load one widget or another widget. Depending on the type of the widget, we'll load one or the other. Yes? Right? We want to have this mechanism that we dynamically choose what we return as opposed to having to hard code it. Yes? Okay. So this is a function using the ES6, the new ES6 syntax. So here we are returning the course grid component. If we do that and we re-render, notice that we still have the grid, right? This hasn't changed. The grid and the list, they still render identical to each other. But the difference here is that now I can use the syntax of passing down courses, right, and passing down the courses here. See that? Right, now I can pass down the courses down to the course grid. Now that I have the courses being passed to the course grid, I can perhaps iterate over this, right, and render each one of these perhaps as a card or whatever I want to render as. Yes? In particular, let's see, do we have a course card? We do. Course card is a course card. Presumably, it receive a property with the title of the course and whatnot, so we should be able to pass in a title to this course card. So let's use this course card inside of our grid. All right, so let's bring in the course card from course card. There it is. And in here we're going to iterate over it. Yes. So to iterate over it, we do what? We open up and say what? Dot. Courses dot map. What's wrong with this code? What's missing? Yes. Yeah, everything has to be in one tag, right? We need to group this into one single element, right? So we're gonna wrap this up before we continue with div, and then close this, right? There we go. All right, excellent. So let's keep going. So we're gonna grab this courses, and we're gonna iterate over that array of courses that's being passed to us. Yes, right? What are we gonna do? We're gonna take each course as we iterate, and do what with it? Right? We could just return the title. Let's see what happens here. Title. Well, let's see what that does. Notice that indeed it's iterating and it's just concatenating the string of those titles, right? And just displaying it one after another. Right? We want something a little more interesting. What we want to do is instead of returning each one of the titles and just concatenate it one after another, we want to create a what? A course card. Yeah? Let's create a course card. We want to calculate a course card and pass down what? What is the course card waiting for? Notice that it maps the properties. Looks like from the properties that it's passing down, it's expecting a property called title. Yes? Right? So let's do that. Let's say that the title, all right, let's move this into the next line. The title is going to be whatever the course that title is. Yeah. So now notice that indeed we are having one course card. One course card, one rendering for 5610, and one down below for 5200. Make sense? So we were able to reuse this core card, right, and dynamically pass down each one of these titles. Make sense? Right? All right, excellent. So let's improve this just a little bit more. We have in Bootstrap in the course card. If you remember, if we go down to the content, or I'm sorry, the components, and we look for the cards. Where are the cards? Cards. I believe there was a card group, was it, or something like that? There it is, right? A cards group allows us to group together multiple cards, right? So that they render from left to right as a grid, right? So we can use that and surround this. We can surround this this rendering of multiple cards with this group. Right? So that would make it just a little bit nicer. You see that? If we want to add more courses to this, we can just edit our courses and just edit a whole bunch of these. Right? We can just copy this multiple times, and this 5200. There's this 3500. There's 5500, and there's 4500. Okay. Notice that as I edit that JSON file, right, I see my changes right away as it recompiles. Everybody okay? Make sense? All right. Let's take a look at other things.